Alright, today on this episode of bigBlue and fixing things and whatnot, it's riser and manifold day. I'm putting them back in today. The old ones were from like 1982, 1983, and they were pretty well gone. I took them off, they cracked, so we noticed some rust coming out of the side and noticed a hairline fracture. Took them off. And well, we're gonna put I already put the starboard side in, so I'll show you that, and let's see here if I can do that. Alright, this is my engine here, and that is the starboard manifold and riser in there. I have the log style kind, and the riser's on the back there. I'll get down in here and I'll show you a little bit of what's going on here. Alright, under here are the 6 bolts. Now, the original risers had, in addition to this hose, they had a hose down here, so there was never any stud there. But there's 6 bolts, just like a manifold in a car, really. Except that's where the raw water comes in, flows down here, up the riser, and down the exhaust out of the boat. One thing I couldn't find really was, let me see if this will focus here, the torque specs for the bolts from the riser to the manifold. These are 5/16, so I torqued them. First I torqued them to 10, then I torqued them to 15, and then I torqued them to 20. So these are all torqued at 20. I guess every 5 hours you're supposed to check these and retorque them as necessary. Make sure you have no leaks. Now for the gasket, I did spray a little bit of copper seal a gasket, just a light spray on the top of the risers, on the top of the manifolds and the bottom of the risers. And I let it set up a little bit, and then I put the gasket on, and then I mounted the riser to the manifold, and that way I was able to hold the riser and put it down on top of the manifold there, so that worked out pretty well. I used these gaskets in here. These are Remflex gaskets that are thick and they're carbon, so they won't rot or rust, and they don't have any metal. So I would be interested to see 20 foot-pounds of torque is what I torqued these two. And you work from the middle out. So you start here, and then you torque this one, and then you torque that one, and then you torque this one, and then you torque the outer one, and then you torque the rear one right there. And that is what the manufacturer recommended. 20 foot-pounds of torque for those Remflex gaskets. This is the port side here, and you can see those are the exhaust ports. The good news is that the block is not cracked. So what I've been doing to prep the other side that I prepped, I took and I just used a file, a nice sharp file, and just kind of went around the exhaust ports. Some people say don't use a file. I didn't use a lot of pressure, so I wasn't really scarring or marring it. Then I used a little bit of emery cloth while I've got those all plugged up, the ports there. The ports are just plugged with paper towel. So I used emery cloth to clean up around the ports, And then people say, well, don't use emery cloth. Well, I did. I used fine grit. And then what I did was when I pulled out each one of these paper towels, I vacuumed out the ports. Well, first I vacuumed out everything around the ports, and then I vacuumed out the ports. So I stuck the little vacuum in there and sucked everything out, sucked out around the ports, so I'm pretty sure there's no fragments of anything that could score the cylinders. I know that's something you don't want to do. And again, with the port side, the port side, I'm going to have to put a bolt in there because it never came with one. And then this dipstick, this oil dipstick here, is quite in my way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the gasket. Oh my gosh, right? I'm going to cut the gasket right here and right here so that it'll just fit and mate up against the surfaces. The manufacturer says to cut off excess material anyways. Most people just throw the gasket on and just bolt it down, and that's because there's nothing really in the way, but I have this oil dipstick that I've got to work on. So one thing you got to remember when you're doing manifold and risers is, I mean, this is not to protect really from water coming in the boat. The fact that this is above the water line is what does it. But if you disconnect down there at the elbow or the other port and where it goes back to exit the boat, you might get water in the boat and it would flood it. So you want to make sure that if you're going to leave this for any time, I left this for about 4 days, that you make sure that you've got all of those hoses clamped down tight and that they're above the water line. Okay, they're in. I got them all set. They're all bolted down. Everything's tightened up. Well, folks, this is called, I guess, the moment of truth. We've got the risers in, manifolds are in, everything is spec'd to Torx, 20 foot-pounds. We'll give you a view. There we go. Both sides are in. Everything's buttoned down. Everything's tightened up. And so here we go. Well, it started up. Doesn't appear to be any leaks here. Seems quieter than before, actually. Those gaskets, I think those gaskets, the Remflex, work pretty well. No leaks there. Not seeing any leaks over there. Nothing's coming out the exhaust. Let's check the exhaust here. Yep, that's water. All right, I think we're doing well. So time to clean up.